Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going to talk about something that feels, incredibly mundane, something you probably see every day, but we're going to look at it through a lens, pun intended, that makes it feel like a genuine medical thriller. We are talking about eyesight.
It's one of those things we take for granted until it starts to go wrong.
Exactly. I mean, we think of needing glasses as just a rite of passage, right?
Sure.
You're in third grade, you squint at the board, you fail a screening, get some frames, and life goes on. It's an inconvenience, maybe a fashion statement. But the data you've brought today suggests we need to completely reframe that. We need to stop treating nearsightedness as just an optical quirk and start treating it as a physiological crisis.
That is not an exaggeration. If you look at the epidemiology, particularly coming out of East Asia, places like Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, the numbers are staggering.
How staggering?
We're seeing prevalence rates of myopia in young adults pushing past 80%.
80%? That's not a trend? That's basically the entire population.
It is the norm. And look, if it were just about needing glasses to drive, we wouldn't be quite so alarmed. But the real concern is that 20 to 30% of those cases are classified as highly myopic.
And that is the hook for today's deep dive. We aren't just talking about thick lenses or needing contacts to play sports. We are talking about the structural integrity of the eye itself. Because high myopia isn't just about blurry vision, is it?
No, absolutely not. And that's a critical distinction to make right at the start. When an eye becomes highly myopic, it's physically growing too long. It stretches. Think of a balloon being overinflated. The material gets thinner and thinner.
And in the eye, that material is the retina.
Correct. And that stretching puts you at a significantly higher risk for retinal detachment, glaucoma, and myopic macular degeneration later in life.
Wow.
So the goal of modern ophthalmology has shifted. It's no longer just about correcting sight so you can read. It's about physically stopping the eye from elongating. It's about disease prevention.
Which brings us to the mission of today's deep dive. We're unpacking a really fascinating study published in Ophthalmology Science in 2025. It's tackling a nightmare scenario for parents and doctors. What do you do when the gold standard treatment stops working?
Exactly. The study is titled, and it's a mouthful, Additive Effect of Highly Aspherical Lenslet Target Spectacles to Children Inadequately Controlled by Atropine Monotherapy.
Okay, yeah, that is quite the mouthful.
It is, but the core question is simple and really compelling. Can we combine chemistry, specifically atropine drops, with physics, these specialized optical lenses, to rescue a child's vision when it's deteriorating fast?
I love that framing, chemistry meeting physics. It sounds like a superhero team-up.
Yeah.
But before we get to the solution, we have to understand the problem. You mentioned atropine monotherapy. That's the current champion for treating this, right?
It is. Low-dose atropine, or LDA, usually at concentrations of 0.01% or 0.025%, is the standard of care globally for slowing myopia progression. It's an eye drop.
And for those of us who haven't sat through a pharmacology lecture recently, what is atropine actually doing to the eye?
Chemically, it's a non-selective muscarinic acetylcholine antagonist. Now, the exact mechanism of how it stops the eye from growing is still a bit debated.
Yeah.
But we know it works. The reason doctors love the low-dose version is that it balances efficacy with low side effects.
Because if you use a high dose, there are consequences.
Big ones. High-dose atropine freezes your accommodation, meaning the kid can't focus up close, like on a book, and it dilates the pupil massively, so you become incredibly sensitive to light.
So you're essentially blinding the kid with light and making them unable to read just to save their distance vision. Not a great trade-off.
Not at all. That's why the low dose is the sweet spot. You get the benefit without the blur. But clearly it's not perfect, or we wouldn't be talking about this study. Precisely. The limitation is variability. The source material highlights that there's a group of children known as non-responders. These are kids who are taking their drops religiously, but their eyes are still growing. They're still marching toward high myopia.
That has to be terrifying for the parents. You're doing everything the doctor says, you're putting the drops in every night, and the prescription just keeps climbing.
It is. And that's exactly who this study targeted. This research, conducted in Singapore, didn't just pick random kids. They recruited 50 children, aged 6 to 11, who were essentially failing their current treatment.
Failing is a strong word. What did that look like in the data?
In the 6 months leading up to the study, despite being on atropine, these kids saw their vision worsen by at least half a diopter.
Is half a diopter a lot?
In 6 months, yes.
Yeah.
That's a rate of 1 full diopter per year. If you're a 7-year-old starting at -1 and you progress at that rate,
Yeah.
you'll be highly myopic before you finish high school.
And structurally, the physical eye.
Their eyes grew longer, what we call axial length, by 0.24 millimeters in just half a year.
So to use an analogy, these kids were on a runaway train, and the brakes, the atropine drops, they just weren't stopping it.
That's a very accurate analogy.
Yeah.
And most of these children, about 86%, were ethnic Chinese, which is relevant because Asian populations tend to have higher rates of progression. So the doctors were faced with a choice. Do you just increase the dosage of the drug?
Which, as you said, brings back the side effects, the glare, the inability to read.
Right. Or do you try a different pathway entirely? And this is where the HALT technology comes in.
HALT, highly aspherical Lenslet target. This is the physics part of our team up. Describe this to me, because looking at the source, this doesn't look like a normal pair of glasses. Or, actually, maybe it does.
It looks deceptively normal at a glance. But if you look closely, it's a marvel of optical engineering. These are the Essilor-Stellest lenses. Instead of a single smooth curve, this lens has a clear center for normal vision. But surrounding that center are rings.
Rings of what?
Rings containing 1,021 tiny high-plus lenslets.
Wait, over 1,000 tiny lenses on the main lens?
Yes, spread out over 11 concentric rings.
Okay, so what does that actually do to the light entering the eye? Why does having 1,000 tiny bumps help?
It creates something called a volume of myopic defocus. To understand this, you have to understand a theory about why eyes grow. In standard glasses, light focuses on the retina in the center, so you see clearly. But in your peripheral vision, your side vision, standard glasses often focus the light behind the retina.
And the eye senses that.
The theory is, yes, the eye senses that hyperopic defocus and thinks, oh, the image is behind me, I need to grow longer to reach it. It's a signal to elongate.
So standard glasses fix your vision, but might actually be telling your eye to get worse.
In the periphery, yeah. That's the concern. The HALT lenses flip the script. Those 1,000-plus tiny lenslets focus light slightly in front of the retina in the periphery.
Ah, so it creates a buffer zone.
Exactly. It sends a stop signal. It tricks the eye into thinking it's grown enough, effectively telling the biological mechanism to, well, to stop elongating.
That is wild. So the center of the lens lets them see clearly, but the rings around are constantly whispering to the eye, hey, stop growing, we're good here.
That's the theory. And individually, we knew these glasses worked, and we knew the drops worked. But nobody had really done a rigorous deep dive into what happens when you combine them specifically for these non-responder kids.
The ones who are failing on the drops alone.
Right.
So let's look at the experiment design. You take these 50 kids who are progressing fast. Do they stop the drops?
No, and that's key. They kept them on the atropine, mostly the 0.01% daily, but they added the HALT spectacles for full-time wear.
So they attack the myopia from two angles at once.
A double-pronged attack.
Let's talk results, because the numbers in this report are honestly kind of shocking.
They are dramatic. Let's just establish the baseline again just to feel the weight of it. In the 6 months before this combination therapy, these kids were worsening by an average of negative 0.60 diopters.
The runaway train.
Then they put on the glasses. In the first 6 months of the combination therapy, myopia progression dropped to negative 0.06 diopters.
Wait, negative 0.06.
Essentially zero.
So it basically flatlined the progression.
It stopped it in its tracks. And if we look at the physical growth of the eye, the axial length, it dropped from 0.24 millimeters down to 0.06 millimeters.
That's a massive reduction. Huge. That's incredible. I mean, we aren't talking about a mild improvement. We are talking about halting the progression, pun intended.
It really validates the rescue therapy concept. And importantly, this effect held steady. They tracked them for a full 12 months. Over the entire year, the total progression was only negative 0.07 diopters and 0.13 millimeters of growth.
But here's the part of the study that really made me sit up straight. There was a mention of a hyperopic shift. Can you explain what that means? Because it sounds almost impossible.
This is one of the wow stats. In 11 of the children, it's 24% of the study group, they observed a hyperopic shift in axial length.
Meaning, the eye got shorter.
Or it stopped growing completely while the child grew, effectively making the eye less myopic relative to their size. In the context of progressive myopia, where the eye is desperately trying to elongate, Seeing reversal or stabilization like that is very, very rare. It's a hugely positive outcome.
So for a quarter of these kids, the combination didn't just slow the train down. It might have actually put it in reverse a tiny bit.
In a manner of speaking, yes. It suggests a very potent physiological response.
Okay, so at this point, if I'm a parent of a myopic kid, I'm thinking, sign me up, give me the drops, give me the glasses, let's do it all.
Yeah.
But we have to be responsible here. The expert always has to bring the nuance. Did it work for everyone?
Unfortunately, no. And this is where the science gets really interesting, the detective work. Even with this powerful combination, 20% of the subjects still progressed by more than half a diopter over the year.
So 1 in 5 kids was still on that runaway train, despite the double breaks.
Correct. And 40% still had axial elongation greater than 0.15 millimeters. So it's not a magic bullet for every single biology.
So the researchers did a multivariate analysis to figure out why. What made those 20% different?
Two main factors popped up. One was age, which, we expect younger children generally progress faster. But the more surprising predictor was pupil size.
Pupil size?
Yes. They found that children with smaller pupil sizes at the baseline, before the glasses were even introduced, had greater axial length growth. They responded more poorly.
That seems random. Why would having small pupils make the treatment fail?
There are a few theories. One is simply compliance. Remember, atropine causes slight pupil dilation. If a child comes in and their pupils are small, it might mean they aren't actually taking the drops or the parents are missing the eye.
Ah, so the small pupil is a tattletale.
Exactly. But there's another possibility. It could be poor absorption. Maybe that specific child's eye just doesn't absorb the drug well. Or, biologically, their receptors aren't responding. If the pupil isn't dilating, the drug might not be having its therapeutic effect on the growth mechanisms either.
That is fascinating. So checking pupil size could be a way for doctors to check if the chemical part of the team-up is actually pulling its weight.
Precisely. If the pupil isn't responding, the myopia control might not be happening either. Gives the doctor a clue.
Now, the study also split the kids into groups based on how much atropine they were taking, right?
Yes.
Some were on the standard daily dose, some on a higher frequency. Did pumping more drugs in help?
Surprisingly, no. They had Group A on 0.01% daily and Group B on either twice daily or a slightly higher concentration. There was no significant difference in results between the groups.
So doubling down on the chemistry didn't matter.
Not in this context. The massive improvement came from the addition of the glasses, not from tweaking the drop regimen. The benefit was driven by the optical intervention.
Which brings us to the practical side. Safety. I know when my eye doctor dilates my eyes, I can't see my phone and the sun hurts. If these kids are on drops A and D wearing these funky 1,000-lens glasses, were they miserable?
That is the best news for the parents. There was zero complaints.
Zero. Kids complain about everything.
Zero complaints of glare. Zero complaints of near blur, difficulty reading. Zero complaints of peripheral blur.
That seems huge because you mentioned earlier that increasing atropine concentration usually comes with a tax of side effects.
Exactly. If they had tried to get this level of control just by upping the atropine to, say, 0.5%, those kids would likely be struggling. By using the combination, they got high efficacy without that side effect tax.
That is the sweet spot. Now, I want to zoom out a bit. How does this compare to other studies? Is combining them actually better than just using one or the other?
The expert term here is synergistic effect. When we compare these results to monotherapy studies where kids just wore HLT glasses or just used drops, the control of the spherical equivalent, which is the prescription number, was significantly better in this combination study.
So 1 + 1 = 3.
In a way. The study notes that while atropine is often better at controlling the prescription number, the glasses seem to benefit both the prescription and the physical length of the eye. By attacking via both pathways, pharmacological and optical, you seem to get a more comprehensive stabilization.
And what about other types of glasses? I've heard of DIMS lenses.
DIMS defocus incorporated multiple segments is a similar technology. It also uses that peripheral defocus concept. There have been studies combining DIMS with atropine. Our expert commentary here notes that this HALT plus atropine study showed better control of the refractive error than some of those. But, you have to be careful with direct comparisons.
Because populations differ.
Exactly. European eyes can progress differently than Asian eyes. But the trend is consistent. Combination therapy beats monotherapy for these difficult cases.
Okay, we have to put on our skeptic hats for a second. We're reviewing a single paper here. What are the limitations? What keeps you up at night about this data?
Well, Scientific rigor demands we look at the sample size. It was 50 children. That's not a massive study. It's a decent cohort, but it's not thousands of kids.
And the control group.
That's the other big caveat. There was no simultaneous control group. They compared the kids to their own past performance, a historical control. They didn't have a separate group of failing kids who were given a placebo or kept on the failing treatment.
Because that would be unethical, right? If you know a kid is getting worse, you can't just watch them get worse for science.
Exactly. It's ethically very difficult. But it does introduce a variable. We know that myopia progression naturally slows down as children get older. This is called natural deceleration.
So some of the slowing might just be because they had a birthday.
Technically, yes. But, and this is a big but, the drop in progression was so sharp from -0.6 to -0.06 that natural deceleration alone cannot explain it.
Yeah.
The effect size is just too large to be from growing up.
Right, they didn't just slow down a little, they hit a wall.
Exactly. The signal is strong enough that despite the limitations, the conclusion holds weight.
So let's wrap this up. What does this all mean for the listener? Maybe they're a parent, maybe they're an optometrist, maybe they just wear glasses.
The main takeaway is that we're moving away from a one-size-fits-all approach. For years, it was just give them drops. Now we see that for children who are failing on standard drops, we have a powerful, safe rescue strategy. Adding HALT spectacles isn't just a backup plan. It's a highly effective way to regain control.
And it validates the idea of combination therapy. In other fields of medicine, like treating high blood pressure or diabetes, we often use multiple drugs or lifestyle changes together. It seems myopia is finally catching up.
That's a great parallel. We are building a layered defense. We have the chemical layer, and now we have the optical layer.
And the fact that it's safe, no blur, no glare, removes a huge barrier for parents who are worried about quality of life.
Absolutely. Compliance is everything in pediatric medicine. If the kid hates the treatment, it won't work. This combination seems to be very well tolerated.
I want to leave the listeners with a final thought, something that stuck with me from the data. We talked about that 24% of kids who saw their eyes stop growing or even shrink slightly.
Yeah, the wow stat.
The hypersopic shift. If we can achieve that in a quarter of the hardest to treat cases, are we approaching a future where we don't just slow myopia, but actually stabilize it entirely? And thinking about that pupil-sized data, if I'm a parent, the next time I'm at the eye doctor, I might be asking, hey, can we measure their pupils to make sure these drops are actually doing their job?
That is a very provocative thought. It suggests that pupil measurement could become a vital biomarker, a way to customize dosage or switch treatments months before we see the vision actually get worse. It's proactive rather than reactive.
Proactive is definitely better than reactive when it comes to eyesight. This has been a fascinating look into how chemistry and physics are teaming up to save vision. Thanks for breaking it down with me.
My pleasure. It's a bright future for myopia control.
And thanks to you for listening to The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.